Hi everyone and welcome to this Google Digital Garage training session, Build Engaging Presentations. I'm really excited to be with you this morning. My name is Kirsty and I'm a trainer for Google's free skills training program, Google Digital Garage. A bit about myself, I've been working on this program now for around 7 years and I absolutely love working with individuals and businesses to help them find their digital presence, their way of selling themselves and their space in the world. But I'm not here alone. You may have already seen Roshane in the chat. If not, please do head over to that chat. It should be on the right hand side of this video that you're watching right now. Say hello, let us know where you're signing in from today, and also what's brought you to the session. What is it that you want to take away from today's session? Is there something specific you're looking for? And that will really help us make sure we're tailoring this session the best as we possibly can to you as an audience. Now, Roshane is also a Google Digital Garage coach, a mentor, and is going to be in that chat speaking to you, sharing some wonderful links, and also answering any of those questions that come in as we move through today's session. So that's myself, that's Roshane. While you're saying hello in the chat, what I'm going to do is also run through a little bit of housekeeping. So first of all, if you do have any trouble viewing or hearing or seeing this webinar as we move through some of the content, do try refreshing your browser. Hopefully that will help anything that's sort of sticking or isn't quite right, and it will help you be able to see us as clearly as possible. If you'd like to join in with that chat that I was telling you about, make sure you have signed into your YouTube channel, your YouTube account, so that you can have a conversation with us in that right-hand side. Remember, we can't see you, we can't hear you, but we can have a conversation with you and make this feel as conversational as possible if you communicate with us in that chat. I will be pausing throughout to answer any questions that have come through as well. So if you do have any questions as we move through, please do pop them in the chat, and I'm sure Roshane will save them and pop them over to me so that I remember there. And I'm going to be asking you a couple of questions as well, so I'd appreciate it if you are ready in that chat to say hello or leave any comments and answers to anything that we've got to ask you too. Other than that, finally, remember this is not a standalone session. Google Digital Garage has so many virtual training sessions as a huge range, a huge schedule as a broader offering. So in the description of this video just below, you'll find a link to the website where you can have a look at the upcoming schedule. If you're based in the UK, we do have a few live face-to-face trainings happening as well. So have a look on that website and see if there's anything that you can make or anything that's of interest to you. Now that's the housekeeping done. How are we going to split up today's session? We're going to go through this in 3 really clear sections. The first section, thinking about our approach. How do we start to create the basis, the structure of our presentation before we actually get to part 2, which is all about the skills needed to create an effective presentation, especially in that traditional sense when we're going to use sort of the slides as you can see today. And the final bit, which is actually my favourite part of this presentation, is starting to think about how we can have that confidence to present effectively. How can we know that we have those essential presentation skills that are going to capture our audience and want them to listen to us, want them to connect with us as we deliver that content? Now, before I jump into objective 1, I'm going to, I skipped a slide. I just want to let you know about this amazing opportunity for free one-to-one mentoring from Google. And we also have our free career certificates here as well. If you've not heard of these career certificates, there's actually now 6 topics that you can have a look through and sign up for. So take that link down, goo.com/career cert UK. Now there's data analytics, there's UX design, there's project management, there's a course on Python, some coding if that's your thing, IT support. So the idea behind these career certificates is that they will leave you what we call job ready in 6 key areas of digital workspaces where people are in high demand and there's not enough people to fill the roles within these areas of learning. So if you're here today and you're currently looking for work and you're thinking, oh, what's my next step when it comes to gaining qualification that's going to leave me job ready, career ready, have a look at some of these Google career certificates via the free scholarship program, which you can access via that link. So my first question to you in the chat, tell myself and Roshane, what is the most memorable presentation that you have experienced? What is the most memorable presentation that you've experienced? Tell me in the chat. I would absolutely love to hear some. And while you do that, I'm just going to say a couple of hellos. So hello to Fiona, Mamuna. We've got, who else have we got? Kimberly. Hello, Kimberly. A few people signing in there. So let us know, everyone I've just said hello to, let us know in the chat. Have you ever attended a presentation that has really stuck with you? And it can be for good reasons or bad reasons. I have a huge memory. When I was at uni, there was a lecturer that was very flamboyant, very, very flamboyant. And everyone had this kind of Thursday morning, 8:30. So Wednesday night was student night. And then Thursday morning, we had an 8:30 lecture. What? Did they do that on purpose? Probably. And everyone would always be very tired, obviously, some a little bit hungover maybe. And this lecturer was so good that people still went because he just made every presentation, rather than him stood there talking through whatever was on the slides, he made every presentation physical. He got us up out of our seats, doing demos. It was incredible. He had just such a great way, and I think he knew he had the graveyard shift on the Thursday morning after student night, and he had really adapted to that, and sort of everyone still went, no matter how tired they were, no matter, there was people that actually would sacrifice staying out on a Wednesday in order to make sure that they were in his lesson and there and ready to go. So yeah, very, very amazing presentation delivery style from a lecturer there. I can see Fiona. I attended a summit today and yesterday, and it was really well held. Oh, nice. Yeah, Fiona, tell us what made it really well held for you. Like, what made it feel good? That would be really nice to hear. So while I'm waiting for Fiona to come back there, think about why you present. So when it comes to you creating your presentation, start to understand, okay, what's the key reasons that you present? Are we presenting to communicate? Are we presenting to persuade someone round to our way of thinking? Or are you presenting to instruct, to educate? Now, usually when you are starting to think about what you want to deliver, if you can clearly start to categorize what you are trying to achieve, even at this very top level, why am I presenting this information? We can start to understand, okay, how do we need to speak? How do we need to write? And how do we need to approach this for the audience that we want to get in front of? I'm going to play you an example of a TED Talk presentation. This is really, really nice example of a very short presentation that can have a very huge impact. Thinking on the lines of memorable presentation. So let's press play here. I can see that there's potentially no sound. 2 seconds. Let me make sure. Oh, hello. Full screen there. Let me make sure we've got sound. This is better. There you go.
What you're doing right now, at this very moment, is killing you. More than cars or the internet, or even that little mobile device we keep talking about, the technology you're using the most almost every day is this, your tush. Nowadays, people are sitting 9.3 hours a day, which is more than we're sleeping at 7.7 hours. Sitting is so incredibly prevalent, we don't even question how much we're doing it. And because everyone else is doing it, it doesn't even occur to us that it's not okay. So instead of going to coffee meetings or fluorescent lit conference room meetings, I ask people to go on a walking meeting to the tune of 20 to 30 miles a week. It's changed my life. You'll be surprised at how fresh air drives fresh thinking, and in the way that you do, you'll bring into your life an entirely new set of ideas. Thank you.
So that's a really good example of really starting to think about, in such a short space of time, how you can create a scenario, tell your story, give the fact. I mean, that fact, we spend longer sitting than we do sleeping. That kind of makes this presentation memorable. And actually, TED Talkers have a real knack for this. They have an absolute knack for keeping something short, sweet, to the point, but they're telling us a story. And stories are the secret ingredient. They are the absolute secret ingredient of any presentation that you create, and they make a massive difference. They can inspire us. They can drive us. They can motivate us. They can kind of shock us. So similarly, that statistic as an example, they can make us think, oh yeah, I do attend loads of Zoom meetings sat at my desk. I do attend loads of fluorescently lit conference room meetings sat down. And they can start to allow us to understand and get on board with what that delivery, what that presenter is saying. And they're much more interesting for us to tell a story to our audience than to just state facts, because stories entertain us. We can start to organize the facts, the research, the key points, the key ideas of our presentation into a narrative. Now, what I want to introduce to you are 4 basic story types that you could use when you're creating that presentation. Now, we've got an origin story, and I'll read some of these out as an example. So, origin story. I started my marketing business with a laptop in my garage and now have workspaces in 30 countries across the world. Loads of inventions, that kind of startup business that has done well, digital businesses maybe as well, have an origin story. They focus on a set of circumstances, where they came from. This is where I was. And the narrator of that story has usually lived through a struggle or a sacrifice, a hardship, in order to inspire where they've got to today. So you've got your origin story. Then we've got our future vision story. Now, this is the opposite of the origin story. It's starting to paint that dream, that picture of what could be and what we would like to finish with. So my marketing business is growing, and my goal is to have offices in 30 countries worldwide. Then we have a failure or success, or failure and success story. Now, these are usually when you have a certain outcome or a learning, you're trying to implement a learning process in what has happened in your recent activity. So something that's failed or success, and that you can put into your cycle of learning with the team that you're talking about. So my first couple of months of attempts at starting my marketing business failed, as I didn't have the right target market. I learnt from my mistake, and now I have offices in 30 countries across the world. So we've found the problem, the issue, the reason for lack of growth, and then we found a way around that. And then we have our realization story. So this is all about solving a problem, being stuck somewhere and finding that kind of light bulb moment that makes us push forward. So I'd been in the finance industry for 15 years when I went to a talk on marketing strategies and realized that I wanted to start my own marketing company and expand into many different countries across the world. So it's that light bulb moment for whoever is telling the story. Now, in terms of that TED talk that we've just looked at, I mean, she definitely had some realization formats there. I realized I was spending more time sat in my chair than I was sleeping, and then back that up with the statistic of how many hours. So, really starting to think, oh, there's so many categories of story here that we can start to understand how we can connect with our audience. Now, as an example, in the chat, if I was going to give a budget report, we'll just do one. What story type could I use for some form of financial report or budget report if I was in a business? Tell me, out of those 4 types, what type of story would you use to report that? And while you're doing that, I'm going to read Fiona's reply. The host tried to cater to the panelists in terms of viewpoints and also linking each response to each following question. The speakers were remarkable as well. They were direct and to the point but humble. Even though it was business based, there were a lot of thought processes, even into authenticity and self-care. If presentation wise, they were really expressive and there was lots of personality in it. Yeah, nice, Fiona. And I agree, sometimes having that connection is definitely a great way to connect. Kimberly, a presentation about our universe. The presenter had animated photos, video clips, and even the background of the slides were excellent. The speaker was also wonderful. I like stories as well. I'm a storyteller. Never thought about categorizing the stories. Yes, Kimberly, nice. And I'm so glad that you've already taken something away, so that if you are already a storyteller, you can really start to think about, okay, I'm trying to do a budget report. I can't see any answers coming through. So I'm trying to do a budget report, something that's seemingly not that entertaining, right? How could we use our storytelling to make sure that everyone in the room that we've got to present this budget report really understands exactly what we're saying? Well, there's a couple of things we could do. We could use a failure and success story for our budget report, because we can start to categorize the information. This is what we've done well. This is what we haven't done so well. And this is how we can move forward with what we know. Then we have a company update. An origin story might be really interesting here. So especially if we might have some new people in the room. So we might have people that are only just being introduced to the company, and we want to tell them, well, this is where we've come from. Welcome to the team. But we also might have some kind of story that's that future vision in any kind of company update. So there's loads of options when it comes to the company update and what we're trying to communicate there. Then we have an ideas pitch. What kind of story could we use for an ideas pitch? Maybe a vision story. Again, that inspiring future vision. Or maybe for an ideas pitch, we want to use a combination. We're going to draw them in with our realization story. This is our light bulb moment. This is where we had the idea for this pitch that we're here for today. And then this is where we envision us going. So you've got a combination of story types there, depending on how you want to actually construct your presentation in that moment. And I can see a couple of comments coming through. So yeah, for the budgets, Fiona, pie charts and charts, yeah, anything visual for some kind of budget report would definitely work very well. And I can see a couple coming through there. Future goals, future story, yeah, absolutely. For the ideas pitch, as I saw them come through, that would definitely work. So start to think, okay, first of all, what are we trying to What are we trying to deliver? And how is a story going to really connect with this audience in front of me so it's memorable and they're going to be on board with what we're saying? And the next thing in this first part to start thinking about, what's your goal? I'm sure all of you can think of a presentation that you've been to where you have just sort of watched and thought, I could have read these slides myself. Nobody is impressed with a presentation that goes on and on and on in that same sort of monotoned voice. I'm sure you've all been there, whether that's on Zoom, virtually, or whether that's in person when you've been studying or you've attended an event. So think about, what's your goal? Why are you there? Why are you presenting? And after the presentation, what do you want your participants to actually do? What's the action? Ask yourself what you want them to think. Really outline the structure of your presentation in a way that people are going to be able to follow along with you in the easiest way possible. So once you know your goal, what do you want them to think? And really, really think about that. Do you want them to be impressed? Do you want them to be educated? Do you want them to feel some form of emotion towards what you're saying? What do you want them to think? And what do you want them to feel? And not just what do you want them to feel, but when. At what points in your presentation do you want them to feel something and think something specifically? And this is where statistics can be really, really great when you've crafted a narrative, a story around what you're delivering. What do you want them to feel and when do you want them to feel it? And once you start thinking, okay, I know why I'm here, I've got my story out, and I've started to understand how I'm going to craft this so that they think and they feel in the right places at the right time. But what's the one thing at the end that you then want them to take away? What are you going to leave them with? So with that TED Talk that we just watched, the presenter wanted us to take away one thing from that short presentation that she was delivering: the need to be more active in our day-to-day lives. That story, that couple of minutes story that she crafted for her presentation, was to create this takeaway for us as an audience to go, well, wow, yeah, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could have a walking meeting, and I could be more active in my day-to-day life. Hopefully you've written some of these questions down, but you can always re-watch this video. It should be live on the same YouTube link for the next kind of 24 hours. Make sure you've written those 4 questions down. So when you're starting to create your presentation, you understand exactly what you want within that structure, within that narrative that you're creating. And then you can start to come to your kind of structure and the flow of your presentation. So that top row there, understanding, just like a novel, just like a story that you would read, have you got a beginning, a middle, and an end? So your beginning is your background, where you've come from, why you're here. But you've also got that problem. This is the problem I want to talk about today. Your middle is the sort of main part of your story. You've got your solution. Where are you going to take them next if they join you? And then make sure you end with something really clear, conclusion. So just like a normal story, you need that beginning, that middle, that end. You need that hook them in right from the beginning. Keep them coming and make sure you give them something actionable at the end. And in terms of the creation process, which we'll move into in a little second, once we've decided that structure and the things that we want to aim for, our goal, how we want them to think and feel, we can then start to create that process and move through the process of actually creating the presentation to deliver. And the first thing that we need to do is make sure we've done our research, make sure that we know exactly the main points that we want to discuss, the sub-points of those main points, and we have the right resources and statistics from reputable sources to support us. And that all comes from our research, because then we can start to plan, we can start to write down exactly what stories we're going to tell where, what statistics are going to work for our goal and the reason that we're delivering this presentation. We can start to plan that out. Only once you then have your plan and you have that kind of structure ready to go, can you start designing your presentation, especially if you're going to have a physical set of slides like what you can see here. We can start to think about things like readability. But remember, all those memorable presentations that we mentioned at the beginning, a lot of the time, it's not the presentation that we remember. It's the person that we're engaging with and their style and how they talk to us and how they deliver their statistics and their facts to us in that story. So it's your presentation, your slides, your resources that you're showing, they're sort of like your backing dancers. You as a presenter, you are the main act. That's why people are there. That's why people are engaging. So remember, it's not just about telling the story, but it's also about doing that work to craft the story that you want to land, but then also making sure that you as a presenter are connecting with your audience in order for that story to land in the room, to land in the virtual room, and really make that connection with your audience. So that brings me to my first pausing for questions, and I can't see any questions, but I can see a couple of sort of comments coming through. Interesting, a vision story. That's one to think about, how to frame it and how to fit it with the presentation. Also, it would depend on what you are presenting, the topic. Yeah, absolutely, Kimberly. And this is what I really wanted you to take away from this first section today, is starting to think about how your approach to building any form of presentation can be tweaked so that you're really, really connecting with that audience that you're going to be delivering to. So let's move into part two. Now, part two is really starting to think about the structure of the physical presentation. So I'm going to show you a couple of tools that you can use to aid your storytelling, to aid how you as a presenter can start to explore your story in an effective way. And I can see, Fiona, you've just popped a question in there. Do you have any tips for introverts on presenting? And I'm hoping that the next two sections can really help you find your style. I actually work with an amazing presenter who's very quiet in day-to-day meetings and sort of how they interact, but still have a draw. And it's all about finding your way of communicating. And you can definitely be an introvert and captivate an audience. It's not about walking onto a stage and being out there. It's absolutely not about that. So I'm hoping you can take some of these next tips, these practical tips for presenting, and help that and use that to help you find your style. So stick with us, Fiona. So how do we start to build an effective presentation? Before we launch into the design and thinking about what it's going to look like and how we're going to stand and all of that stuff, we need to think about our audience. That's the first step here. Think about who's going to be in the room with you. Is it going to be a small group of people? Is it going to be a panel? Is it going to be a large room? Who is going to be in that room? Because that is going to, once you know who you're going to be delivering this presentation to, it can make and allow you to create something that's going to be as easy as possible for that audience to completely understand the next point, your message. So who are you going to be delivering to? Do you know who they are? How many people? And what information do you want to deliver to them? What's the message? And then finally, you can then start thinking about any tools or any extra tech that you want to add in to the way that you present. Things like, are you using a presenter, a projector? Are you using kind of microphones? Down to things like extra digital tools that I'm going to share with you in a second. To slide or not to slide, that is the question. Now, you can present like our TED Talker without slides. It's not mandatory to have a presentation. It's more traditional. I mean, we have slides today, but as you've seen, these slides don't have all of the information on them. They have little nuggets that you can take notes about, but your focus is not going to be on reading these slides for this whole time we've got together today. So you can decide whether you want to slide or whether you don't want to slide. But there's some other tools that you can use that are digital. Mural, and I'm sure Roshane can share some of these links for you in the chat. So we've got Mural. Now, Mural is a really great tool that you can use to ideate, get some ideas flowing. It's very, very kind of interactive. You can collaborate if you're part of a team, and it's a really nice tool that you can use. You've also got tools like Canva. So Canva is a real visual tool that you can use to actually illustrate some of those things on your presentation. So maybe you want to use Canva to build your presentation. There's also templates in there as well. So Canva is another great tool that you can use. And all of these tools you can use for free, which is great for us, right? And then we have Slido here. Now, Slido, if you're someone who uses something called Google Slides, which is Google's version of PowerPoint, you can actually use Slido as a free add-on. Slido creates this interactive element to your presentation where we could do things like polls or Q&As, where we could get the audience to use their phone to ask live questions. So similarly to how I'm engaging with you in the chat, Slido gives you that next layer of interactiveness throughout your presentation. But of course, you have the option of using no tools at all. Never forget that. We don't need to overcomplicate it. If you're not confident in using some of these tools, then maybe your best option is to use none at all. And it's going to be you and you're the focus. But whatever tool you do choose, make sure you know exactly how to use it and you have practiced using that tool live before your presentation day. Really, really important. So when it comes to actually building the slides, you've decided, yeah, I'm going to have slides. I'm going to go for more of a formal presentation. There's a few tools that you can choose from. There's actually a lot of different software available that you can use to create slides. Now, what we're using today and what I'm going to talk through is that tool that I mentioned a minute ago, which is Google Slides. Now, this is Google's free presentation tool. It's great for collaboration as well, and you can use it completely online. But of course, you've got Microsoft PowerPoint. There is a free sort of cut down version of Microsoft PowerPoint that you can use online, but there's also that full paid version that you can have offline on your device. Another one that's very, very similar to both of those tools, because they both work very similarly. If you have an Apple device, you might have heard of Keynote, which works again, it's very linear. It works very similarly to all of those. A little bit of an out of the box one. If you're looking for a bit more of a creative presentation, there's an option called Prezi, which is really, really nice. Once you've got used to the style that it works online. And you can almost create these mind maps that when you click into them, rather than this linear, I'm going to move through my slides, you explore your story within Prezi. Now, there is a freemium version, but you have to make sure that when you're delivering, you've got access to Wi-Fi to use it. And then there's sort of a set of paid versions for Prezi, but it's definitely a creative option if you're thinking, oh, I want something a little bit different. Now, they all have small differences, and we're going to take a closer look at Google Slides, as that is something that we're using today that you can see. So Google Slides, as I said, is fantastic for collaboration. You can access it anywhere as long as you've got Wi-Fi, and it's free. And because you're online and is part of your drive, there's none of that losing your work. It automatically saves to the email address that you've signed in with, which is amazing. So Google Slides is what we're going to talk about for today's session. Now, just like PowerPoint, you can see it looks very, very similar. If you're someone that isn't very practical when it comes to creating those colors and you just want something simple, you can actually choose a theme. On the right hand side, once you go into themes, you can see you can select the best one for you, and they will then give you some pre-designed themes that will allow all of your presentation to have a consistent look, a consistent feel for when you get to deliver. You can see down the side, it doesn't mean that every slide is the same. It gives us a list of formatting options for different slides within that theme. It just means that the font is going to be similar, the headlines are going to have the same size font, the colours are going to be within the same colour palette, and it's really going to help us get started by building the visual side of that presentation. Now, if you pick a theme but you don't quite like the font, you can also use what we call edit in the master slide, where you can change some of the fonts within that theme. So how to do that: you go to slide of the menu, you go down to edit master, and that will bring up this page here. You want to go to that top master slide, choose the font that you want to change, so in this case the main headings, change the heading, so we're changing it to impact, and then press that cross in the top right corner. Once you've done that, you'll then be able to see throughout that whole theme, that whole presentation, that every single main header has changed to the font that you change in that master slide. So this is going to allow you to apply theme-wide changes nice and easily within that master slide. Remember, it's not about making it look really fancy. Just because we can, it doesn't mean that we need to add loads of different fonts and loads of different styles within that. Don't try not to do anything within that theme that's going to detract from what we've already talked about, our story, the goal of why we're delivering. In terms of the navigation, if any of you have ever used any word processing software, Word, Docs, PowerPoint, this will feel really familiar. It's set up to be as functional as possible, so don't get too scared about using something new. On the top left, we can add our presentation title, so we know exactly what it's saved as. Along the bottom there, you can see we've got all those symbols that should be recognizable to you. We've got the selection, we've got to be able to add a text box there with that box with a T in it. We can add a picture, we can add shapes, we can add lines and arrows. So that's all in that first section on the bottom. And then the bit to the right, this is where we can edit the actual slides. So maybe we decide we want a different theme, or in that layout section, that is where we can access all of the different formats of slides within that theme that we've chosen. Transitions, now we can add transitions if we want something that's not just swipe into the next slide. We can add those transitions within the slides as well there. The only thing that's different here with the Google Slides is this top right here, the present section. Now you've got two options. You can either just press the present button. It will make your slides full screen. If you don't have speaker notes, that's a great option, and then you can just click through the slides. If you have speaker notes and you've got two screens and you want to be able to see your speaker notes in front of you, you can also use that little arrow next to present and select present or presentation mode or presenter mode, which will then open up a full screen presentation so you can share that with your audience, and it'll also open up a second window that includes your speaker notes that you've worked on. Once you've got together with that navigation around the actual software, you can start thinking about what's on those slides, crafting everything you've thought about in your structure and your storytelling to really hook your audience in. And that starts with your title. Have you got an impactful title? Have you got something that tells your audience exactly, within a few seconds of reading what's on that screen, exactly what they're going to get from the presentation that you're about to deliver? And that's really, really important. So make sure your title is impactful. Then when it comes to text on the slide, think about what you've seen here today. Keep it simple, keep it easy to digest. We don't want people focusing on having to read the slides over listening to what you have to say as a presenter. So think about, okay, how can I use as little text as possible? And some other top tips around creating that presentation. In terms of the number of slides, there's no magic number, but my advice to you would be to think about how long you've got to deliver. And if you were to spend a couple of minutes on each slide, how many slides roughly do you think you need? Now, it's okay to sort of push that. If you went with a minute per slide and you push that a little bit, there are going to be some slides where your pace is quicker, and you're not going to spend so much time there. And there's going to be some slides where you have 3 bullet points and you're going to spend 2 or 3 minutes on that slide. So create an average slide point and make sure you're sort of conscious that if you only have half an hour, you've not got 90 slides to get through, for example. Bullet points. Remember what's on the slide. You want people to focus on what you're saying rather than reading all of that text on the slides. And bullet pointing some key points can help make sure that you are sticking to what you want to cover on that slide, but it's not a script. You're not reading it. Think about the font. So for any writing that you do have on the slide, make sure that it's readable. And vary the content. So again, you can see the different types of slides that we have. Some of them have visuals, like a timeline, and similar to what you can see. Some of them have one point on that slide. So think about what you can have that really backs up everything that you've got to say. And finally, pace. Can you keep it interesting by varying the pace, not just of how you speak and how long you spend on each slide, but also what's on there. Sometimes you might have a long slide like this where there's just key points. I'm going to spend some time on it. And then sometimes, like the slide previously, we've got one point with a visual. So varying that pace to keep your audience engaged with you. And the last thing to point out when it comes to actually creating your presentation, a lot of our presentations, like this one, are now becoming online, virtual presentations. So how can you start to make sure you're fully prepared for that virtual space? Do you understand how to screen share in the tool that you're going to be using? Are you going to have participants with video on? So if you're using a different tool where you can actually have a conversation, are you going to allow them to have their videos on so you can see them? How are you going to have that live audience participation? So today we've had our chat. We've been able to engage with each other in that chat and answer questions, have a conversation. Ease of use. How easy is it for people to use that tool that you've decided to use? And again, what's the cost? Is it going to cost you to create a presentation in that style? Or is it going to cost your users to sign in to that online presentation? So starting to think about how can you build your online presentation? How can you make sure that you are fully equipped to deliver that in the right way? And that leaves us to our answering for questions here. And I can see that we don't have any questions so far, which is fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into our final section, which is all about boosting your presentation skills, which is my favorite section actually. Some of those techniques that you need to deliver engaging presentations to all different audiences. How are you going to have something that's consistent from beginning to end that goes further than just those traditional slides and that structure that we've talked about already. So first of all, ask yourself a question: what kind of presenter are you going to be? We talked about storytelling, beginning, middle, end. So what's the way that you want to make sure that people are connecting with you, people are understanding where you're coming from, especially if you've got a presentation that is rooted in who you are? Now, that question that we had earlier, do you have any tips for introverts presenting? A lot of people believe that a good presenter or confident speakers that speak in public have a natural gift, and it's happened for them. They're just naturally good at it, and that's it. You either have it or you don't have it. But actually, is that the case? I personally don't believe so. It's a muscle, right? It's a muscle. If I picked up a violin and started playing tomorrow, I'm not going to be very good on the first time I play. I'm not going to be instantly, yeah, I can play the violin. I'm going to have to practice. And that's exactly the same when it comes to presentation skills. It's a muscle. It's a muscle like any other skill that we practice, that we hone in on our style, and that we start to discover what kind of presenter we want to be. And the first thing to think about is adapting to our audience. How many people are you going to be presenting to? And that's not going to change who you are or change your style necessarily, but it is going to allow you to make sure that whether you're talking to one person or two or three people, or whether you're talking to a large group of people, you can understand exactly how to have that conversation within those different crowds. And actually, in terms of the difference between presenting to one person and presenting to a crowd of people, it's a conversation still, either way. The numbers might be bigger in the room, but the best way for me and how I deliver is to make sure that I am still approaching that presentation that as if I'm talking, I'm having a conversation, I'm talking to my audience directly. Audience participation is really important as well. Make sure you're interacting with your audience, no matter how big or small they are. There's different ways that you can interact. With large groups, you might do things like show of hands. With smaller groups, you might ask questions to specific parts of the room. So really starting to think about how can you interact with your audience, ask them questions, get them involved, because we don't want to talk at them non-stop. Also, when you do ask questions and they get something back, make sure that you're appreciative when people do come back to you, and make sure you follow up. So if I've shown you an example. I've come back to that question with Fiona kind of 2 or 3 times. When people make the effort to talk to you in that however you've decided to communicate, make sure that you're being proactive with that and appreciative. And listen, really, really important. Have you actively listened to those questions? Have you acknowledged those questions? Have you made sure that you are really engaging in a way that audience know that you've listened to what they've said? So when it comes to the content itself, we want to avoid that content overload. We want to make sure that every single slide has value. We want to make sure that we have tailored that content to the people in the room. If we have a plumber in the room, make sure that we're using a plumbing example as a very top level example. Make sure it's relevant to exactly who you're talking to. Focus. Now, this is really important. So on every slide, you can have 3 verbal points for each slide, or have a set of 3 slides with 1 point for each slide. That's going to help you vary the pace, but also make sure that your content is interesting with that story. And finally, pause. Take a breath. When we get nervous, we panic. When we're uncomfortable, we can start speaking really fast and we ask a question. We don't wait. We don't stop. But put yourself on the other side. When someone asks you a question, do you know the answer straight away? Or do you have to think about it? Because your audience is no different. They're not answering because they don't want to speak to you. So pause. Take a breath. And actually, pausing gives you a moment to calm your mind racing and actually get you to go, okay, what's next? And give that thinking time, especially if you've got an audience that are taking notes. It gives them time to also process anything that you've just said. So the power of pause is really, really important. The next important thing for you as a presenter is your voice. It's a powerful tool. So understanding how to adapt that within your style, depending on who you're delivering to and the situation you're in, is super, super important. And there's some things that you can start thinking about. Volume. Depending on how many people are in the room, or if you're in a virtual situation, how loud does your voice need to be? Can everyone hear you? You can also use your volume as a tool. When you want people to lean in and really listen to you, you can speak quieter and softer. And then when you want to make a big point, you can speak louder and make that energy kind of burst out. That's just volume. Style. Now you're going to have your own style. You're going to be able to adapt and actually sort of start to adapt that style depending on the audience, but also the subject that you're talking about. Tone. You might want to vary your tone. Remember, come back to those memorable presentations and anything that's been boring to you. Usually, the thing that they have in common is they're reading off the slide and their voice is very one-toned and it's really boring and it's very monotoned and you think, oh no, I can't listen to this anymore. So your tone, how can you make your presentation interesting and be conscious of how you're delivering that? And finally, the pace, which relates back to that pause. Are you maintaining a steady pace, a steady speed, not too slow, but you're not too fast? You're giving those pauses and taking those breaths. You're not rushing through the content, but you're calm, you're clearly paced, and you know exactly what you've got to deliver by what time. Because that can help you also feel more confident in those next steps. The other thing when you're delivering to think about, especially those of you that potentially are feeling a little bit nervous, your body language. Your body language is communicating as much as what the words that are coming out of your mouth. So thinking about what your body language is communicating is really important, and checking in on that and using that as a tool. Because if I said to you, and we were all in one room right now, and I picked one of these and said, right, in your seat in front of the camera, look nervous. I'm sure a lot of you, if you did that right there and behind the camera where no one can see you, I bet all of you did something like shoulders hunched, look down, your arms closed in. So, are you shuffling? Are you giving out that body language as if you're nervous? In comparison to confident, chin up, shoulders back, open expression. So even if you are feeling a little bit inside, by consciously making the movements to feel confident, your audience isn't going to know. They're going to be drawn to what you're saying because what they can see is a confidence, simply with your body language. If you are someone that struggles with sort of pumping yourself up and getting to that point, try some power poses. 30 seconds is all you need. You got the Wonder Woman, or the performer as examples here, but try and stand in one of those poses for around 30 seconds to a minute. See how it makes you feel after. My personal thing is star jumps for energy. Before I deliver anything, I do 10 star jumps. Get my blood pumping and just get myself in that focus mode. Find something that makes a difference for you pre-presentation. Something that makes you go, yes, I am ready now. I know what I've got to say. I know what my story is. I know who my audience is. I'm ready to deliver this. And power poses can be a really nice way of getting you ready to take on that challenge in front of you, especially if you're someone that struggles with those nerves before a delivery. Some other top tips to think about and be super mindful about when it comes to delivering: your stance. I have a person that I work with on their presentations, and when they stand up in front of an audience, their feet, rather than sitting kind of straight, they took one behind the other, and I don't know how they do it with their legs, but their feet are almost facing this way. And really, even though they are very, very clued up, they know exactly what they want to say, their presentation is a really great standard. Just that simple thing with their stance makes them look really uncomfortable in the moment. So it's something to really think about. How are you standing? Movement. Gestures are really important. And sometimes, again, when we get nervous, we gesture in a way that feels unnatural. If you're going to use your hands, you're going to talk with your hands, use them with purpose. Use them with intention. And when you're not using your hands to gesture to something, can you keep your hands in a position that's not going to distract your audience? Because we don't want to be stood there like robots with our hands behind our sides, but maybe you've got a pose that keeps your hands still and doesn't distract people when you're talking. And the final one here, connecting. Especially if you've got real people in a room, how can you make eye contact? Now, it's not about making eye contact and staring at the same person for a minute. That's a bit creepy. We don't want to stare at them. But how can you make sure you're clocking eyes with those people in the room so that they know you're connecting, you're listening actively, you're starting that conversation? In terms of a final point here before I finish up today, the other thing that I would say to be mindful of are some of your what are called tics or bad habits, bad presentation habits. Things like moving. Imagine if I was someone that liked to sway, and this whole presentation I was tapping, I was swaying, or I was out of camera every time I moved. That's going to be really annoying, right? So anything that you do that's a fidget. Early doors, one of my first ever presentations, I actually filmed myself so I could watch it back a couple of days later, and not for looking at me and going, oh, I look tired, or I look this, no, it was purely to have a look at what I did in my stance and in my movement as a presenter. And I had a habit that was terrible. I was wearing a zippy hoodie as part of my uniform, and the whole way through any bits that I was nervous about delivering, I went vroom, 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 vroom. All you could hear was my zip on the key parts that I knew I was nervous about. I looked like I was really confident beforehand, and as soon as I hit a bit of the presentation, I was like, oh, I don't know what I really want to say here, and don't feel like I'm prepared enough. I would fidget with my zip. So how can you stop fidgeting? Really important. But remember, practice, practice, practice. It's like a muscle. Public speakers don't just step on stage and yes, they're wonderful and they're great at it. Recap. Who's your audience? How can you adapt to them? Think about your voice and how that is going to engage with your audience. Consider your body language. Are you presenting confidence or you're presenting nervousness? And practice that performance. Now, I can't see any questions, but please do pop them in. I want to let you know about some of those next steps and remind you of some of the things there are to take away. And tell me in the chat, what's the thing that you've taken away from today's session? What are you going to go and put into action after this presentation? Remember the career certificates? There's those 6 programs that are looking to get you job ready in a specific skill in the UK. goo.gov/career cert UK is the link you need to sign up to any of those. And finally, we absolutely love to hear your feedback. So if you have really enjoyed today's session, which I hope you have, thank you for all your engagement and any of those questions that did come through. Please do leave us some feedback at goo.gov/digital garage feedback. I'd absolutely love to hear any of your thoughts on how we can continue to make these sessions as useful as possible. If you do talk about us online, use our hashtag Digital Garage so we can follow the conversation. And good luck. Good luck with your presentations, creating them and practicing those delivery skills. I hope this has allowed you to have some things and some real specific areas that you can go away and work on. Other than that, remember to pause. Fiona, yes, so important, right? Make sure that you give that space for thinking. Nice. Thank you so much. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you so much. We're out of time, unfortunately, but I'm sure I will see you again on many more Google Digital Garage training sessions in the future. Have a great day.